Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, this is James Herzing, Fusion 360 Community Manager. With me today is Paul Sohi. Paul, do you want to do a quick intro? I guess you can all see him on the screen as well.
Hi everyone. I'm Paul. I work for Autodesk now, but when James and I organized this event, I was still working for myself, and so I'm going to put that hat on today. So I still run a company called 2052. We're a product design art house, and I'm going to go through the basics of the sculpting environment with everyone today.
Awesome, sounds good. So I'm going to be hanging out here looking at some of the questions that come in and trying to interrupt Paul from time to time, but I'm going to pass it over to him to take control and run this thing. So if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the little panel down at the bottom, and we will do our best to answer those. Go for it, Paul.
All right. So I've got these two objects here to show you guys. So one is this video game controller, and the other one is this funky looking vase. I keep reaching over for my 3D mouse, which I do not have at home today. So this is what we're going to focus on today, and this is a vase that I've designed for myself. It's 3D printable, believe it or not. I know it looks a bit crazy, but this was inspired by ferrofluid, if anyone knows what ferrofluid is. If you don't, ferrofluid is it's an oil with basically very, very fine iron filings in it, and when you start to mess around with it with magnets, you get it. It sort of looks like it's come alive, and you get these really quite amazing shapes. Now, this didn't actually take very long at all. It took me about let's say 20-25 minutes. I'm going to go a little bit slower today, obviously, so everyone can sort of keep up to date with what I'm doing, but I think that's enough of an introduction, so let's jump right into it. So I'm going to go File, New Design here, and I'm going to jump straight into the Create Form environment. And just to begin this thing, I'm going to create some circles for my loft. Now, I'm going to first go to Offset Plane, and I have this one here. I'm going to pull that up to 190. So this was designed to be 3D printable inside an Ultimaker. So any 3D printer that fits that kind of volume, this will work just fine in it. So next, I'm going to draw my bottom circle. So let's jump in here and make that one. Let's go with 100 mil. And then stop that sketch, draw my second one, and pick that plane up here. That's why I drew that one, and I'll make that one 160. So that gives us a pretty nice set of circles to begin with. So next is loft. So under create, we've got loft, and just going to pick my two circles here, if I remember to click on them properly. There we go. Now, I'm just going to say this now because it's pretty important. So usually when you use the sculpting environment, I would say that you should treat this very much like a CNC treats a piece of wood, or I guess more appropriately, a sculptor would treat a piece of clay. So really what you should be doing is you do a first pass, which is rough, and then you go through and you add more details. So usually your cone, your pipe, your block, whatever your starting object is, you'll start with the least number of necessary vertices. So the vertices are, in this case, we're talking about the faces and the length spacing and the width spacing. So if I change that number here, you'll see that what that does is adds more faces to my object. Now, this guy over here is pretty complex, and it was used just using the edit form. So we're going to cover a lot of the edit form, but this guy over here, which because I've jumped between the two tabs, is going to assume that I'm finished with it, so I'm just going to undo that and then go back to the loft. requires a fair amount of detail. Now, to begin with, this might not make a huge amount of sense, but as we get into it, you'll see why I'm putting a lot of faces in. So I'm going to go by 20 and 15. Actually, you know what? Let's make that 12. That looks good. I'm going to hit OK there. So we're still in the sculpt environment, and we've got our basic piece. Looks very much like the garbage can under my desk right now. But here under Modify, my default Modify icon is missing there. I don't know why that's happened. Let's just push that back up there. We've got Edit Form. Now, when you open Edit Form, you've got a huge number of options here. And thankfully, today, I'm not going to worry too much about this. But the ones that are worth knowing is definitely here in the selection filter. So you'll see as I hover over any of the faces here, I can highlight a face, I can highlight an edge, and I can highlight a point as well. Now, sorry, a vertex. Now, you might find this a little bit annoying. Maybe you're working on something that requires only manipulation of the vertices, or maybe only manipulation of the faces or edges. Well, all those options are right there. So you can just filter that down, and you can filter to just bodies. So because of what we're doing here, I'm going to choose vertex, because I'm only really interested in the points here. So as is the case with anything else that you do with Fusion, when you're manipulating something, you'll get your manipulation ball. Now, this is pretty interesting because it works a little bit differently to what you might be used to in the modeling environment. So in the sculpting environment, you'll see we've got a few additional ones. Now, when you're moving objects in the model environment, you'll be used to these. So you've got your blue arrows for moving in fixed planes, you've got your freeform movement here, and you've got your rotations. Now, we've got a couple additional ones here in the sculpting environment. We've got these dashed lines here. We've got a global position right here in the middle. And you can see as I just sort of move around those, you've got a couple of different ways of highlighting this. So just so you know what those are, this is going to move things around in a more free-form environment. You can see how that's kind of playing around with it. And that's a scale. In this case, because we're grabbing a vertex, scale's not going to do anything, so I'm just going to grab a face and just show you how that works. So if I grab a face, I can scale proportional to a plane. So you can see if I go into the right view, you'll see that a little bit better. You can see how that's kind of just manipulating it in that plane. And then you can also just you can just move it vertically and horizontally as well. And you can do that for all the other planes too. Or you can, let's just undo that and bring up Edit Form again. Grab a global face and then, grab a face and use the global tool instead. And you can see how that scales. And that's relative to the center of that face, and that's relative, obviously, to the tool that I'm using. Now, while this is all great, sometimes you want to manipulate stuff not from the center, not from the kind of average point. You want to get a bit more control over it. So just like with the Move tool in the modeling environment, we can set a pivot, so we can change where that is. And that snaps by default to the edge faces. So you've got the ends, the midpoints. You can snap to the middle of your faces. And then once you've clicked in, just make sure that you OK that, because you can also change the default position of your gumball here as well before you start moving things. So if you just hit Done, you can see now, as I move that face around, how that's adjusted the pivot, and so it adjusts how this whole thing gets played around with. So that's a pretty quick overview of how those work. Now, in the case of this guy, what I did here was I used the pull tool, or rather I used Edit Form, and I pulled at the vertexes to create this shape. Now this was pretty intentional. If I sort of freeze it there, you can see that there's a rotation along this line here, and that kind of follows all the way around. So if I twist it around, there is some kind of reasoning to my design. Now, let's get involved. So let's grab our Edit Form, and change this to vertex again. And I would suggest starting at the bottom here. So if you're following along with me, I'm just going to grab this one here first and minimize this guy here. And I'm going to use my freeform movement here in the ground plane. So if I grab that and I pull him out, you can see, whoopsie doodle, that guy went a bit crazy. Let's pull him back into position. You see as I pull it out, because I'm using the point tool, you get this kind of like, well, I guess nipple effect, right? So, and the more you pull it out, the more pronounced it's going to get. But obviously, you don't want to keep pulling it and then just look at this thing and say, well, hey, yeah, I've got this nice point that I wanted, but as a result, it's also like ridiculously far out from my object. So, again, the way that this effect was achieved here is I have a push point here, and then where this indentation is, I've pushed it inside. So if I go here, you can see that there's an internal push as well, or pull rather. And so I pull it out and I push it inwards, and that's how the effect's created. So I push this one out. Now I'm going to go back to edit form, and I can grab this guy. I'm having some performance issues here, so I'm just going to change back to all and pull that chap in. Seems about right, but I'm still not too happy with that pointing, so I'm just going to grab the other guy over there and do the same thing. Now, that basically covers how this form is created. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to grab these guys, give them some movement. Whoa, that guy is not happy. Let's just pull that round. And just keep
Hey, Paul.
that around the bottom. And start to get this. Yes.
While you're going through this, we have a question here about how did you set up the cone shape to begin with?
Oh, how did I set up the cone shape to begin with? So I did a loft between two circles. I'll start a new drawing and show you how I did that real quick.
All right,
So
hope it doesn't throw you off too much.
no, not at all. So just make sure you have your origin on if you don't have your origin on there. And I'm in the sculpt environment, so if I go back to model, you see just to get to the sculpt environment, we've got this create form. And when you click on create form, you'll see this snaps, and you've got a new tool set here, and you're in the sculpting environment. And the sculpting environment is T-Splines, so if anyone knows what T-Splines is, that's the kind of environment we're working in. So the first step here was to go under construct and pick offset plane. And the offset plane allows me to grab that origin point and then pull it upwards to create a second drawing plane. I'm not going to use dimensions this time around just to show you how I did that. So go 130, and I drew a circle on the top, on the ground plane first. And so let's just make that there. I stopped that sketch and drew a second one on this plane up here. Pull that guy out and stop that sketch. And under create, we've got loft. So that's how you get your cone. And then you can add the number of faces you want here. When you're happy with it, you can just hit OK. You might get thrown off by this, like my kind of default, my logic class the first time that I made this was to go to create and then pick cylinder, and then I scaled the whole thing out. I don't recommend you do that because you'll end up with some errors with this guy. But I hope that
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
So I'm just going to go, no problem. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to keep on doing that around this guy until, whoa!
While you're working through this as well, we have another quick one for you, and that's, could you use the mirror command to speed up the polling process?
You absolutely could, but in the case of this design, you'll see that this isn't actually symmetrical. So while I have this kind of rotational pattern here, you can also see that I've kind of, if I could put my extremely haute design hat on, created these moments on this sculpture. So there are these points that get pulled a lot further out, like over here. And if I was using the mirroring tool, that might work for the first pass, but then you'd have to like not be mirroring anymore to create these effects without bouncing off on the other side. But if you wanted a very symmetrical form, by all means, you could absolutely do that. You got to make sure though, when you're if you're going to use symmetry here, make sure that you've got a form with actually an odd number of vertical edges, so that you can pick one of those to create a uniform symmetry line. I'll just show you what I mean quickly. If I grab a box and I draw a box here, if I pull that up and I want to create a symmetry across here, this will be fine because I've got one edge running the whole way through. But if I pull it so it's like that, and I have 3 faces and 2 vertical edges, if I try to create a symmetry line here, now if I go under symmetry and I create mirror internal and I do that, can you see how I've got these green lines all the way across like that? It's not going to work. It's not going to be ideal for what you want. So what you would want is, I'll do that one more time real quick. So if I do this, let's just okay that, and I pick symmetry this way, I've got a nice continual green line. And that way I know that my symmetry is going to be nice and is going to work properly. So let's just get rid of that guy. And we've got our final modification down here. You can pull that up because that's actually in the plane. Now the next step with this guy is just to go through and pull these ones in. Now I'm just going to show you a slight shortcut to that. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to pick these guys one by one. I've got nearly all of them. Of course, bear in mind, anyone who is planning on making one of these or is making one right now, I picked this number of faces because I want a relatively complex object. You could have picked less, and if you pick less, then you'll have a less complex thing, but you'll certainly achieve the same kind of aesthetic goal here. Now you'll notice that because I've picked all of them and I'm in a circle, my manipulation tool is right here in the center. And because I want to create that inward indentation, I'm just going to grab my global scaling and pull that in. Oop, if I can pull it the right way, there we go. And that's starting to give me a nice kind of indentation effect. It's a little bit more pronounced here because that's the one that I moved manually. And I'll just keep going around and you can see how that's happened. And just to keep that pattern going and to create that rotational effect that I've got here, so you can see how that sort of staggers its way up. That's created by just doing the same thing that I've done here, but pulling one dot across. So I picked this vertex rather than the same vertex above it, and if I pull this one instead, you'll see what happens. So now, I've done this on purpose. You'll notice that there's a bit of a problem here, because if I grab this guy, then I'm affecting everything, and that's not really going to give me the shape that I want, because if I then go and do that here, I'm going to end up with a bit of a weird kind of, grab the right one, excuse me, where are you? There you are. Grab that through, and that's not really going to create the effect that you want. You're just going to end up with this weird kind of just amorphous blob. So you actually have to give yourself a bit of spacing, and that's part of the reason that I picked such a high number of faces to begin with. So I can't grab that guy. I've got to grab this guy up here. Now, I grab that vertex and I pull it through, and you can see that I'm getting the effect that I want. I'm still affecting this guy down here, so I will have to come through and pull him inwards. to counteract what I was doing before. And that is starting to take shape. So I'm going to blast through this. So we got something kind of nice. Now if you're 3D printing this yourself at home, this does work on an Ultimaker. I've printed this out a couple of times on an Ultimaker. It does take a while. It is a pretty complex object. Any FDM machine should be able to handle this if you're smart with your support material. But for best results, I guess, always use SLA. Let's just go through and just keep grabbing those guys. And one more. And just keep doing that. Oh, this one's gone a bit funny. Let's pull him out over here. This guy, do that. And maybe there. All right, and this is starting to take shape. And so what I was talking about earlier, if I grab this guy who's so this point is relative to here, and then correspondingly over to here as well. So if I grab him and I move him inwards, you'll see that starts to create a really nice accentuated effect on what we're trying to get. And let's just pull him out a bit more. So let's give that guy a little bit of definition. All right, whoa. So once again, I could pick this guy, but if I do that, that's actually the correct one. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to keep going around, and of course, keep firing those questions at me. If you have any more. So let's go through. Let's grab these guys.
I have one more for you, but it might take a little bit of time.
Oh, go for it.
All right. So could you explain a little bit more about the star and T-points? Like, when do they appear, and what good are they, and how can you avoid them?
Sorry, the star?
Sure.
So look at that question there. Oh, right, I can't see the questions. The star and the T-point. I'm not actually sure what that's referring to.
Pascal, if you're still around there, could you type in a little more? Another question while we wait, is there a way to pull multiple points at the same time?
Yeah, of course. So you can just, so if I got one point and I grab this other guy over here and this one, just in the same way. So if you're on a Mac, you can hold down Shift, and on a PC for that matter. Or you can even use Command. Command is going to be, and then, so if I grab, so I've got 3 selected there. Whoops. Oh no, they're still, we're still good. All right, and yeah, if I grab my, let's rotate around. I grab my manipulation point and I do that. It is going to generate the same kind of effect, but not to the same degree, because it's, so in my case, what I want to do is I'm trying to create this sort of not strictly uniform, but relatively radial pattern. So you can see the points is sort of tangential to the circle here. So by all means, I could grab a few at the same time and do that, and then I could sort of correct it out with the global scale. But it's not quite what I want to do. But it does kind of work. So that is certainly another way of doing it. It's certainly a way of speeding the process up. It is certainly worth noting at this point, while we're talking about the sculpting environment, that it is pretty radically different to the modeling environment. Now, the way that I think of the modeling environment is that what I'm doing is very specific. Everything that I'm creating with purpose and intent. Now, that is also absolutely true of the of the sculpting environment. The only difference really being that with the sculpting environment, because you're dealing with a very free-form object, you can see that as I'm pulling it and I'm pushing it around, it is quite organic. It sort of responds to itself. It does mean that the kind of tips and tricks that we would share for the model environment are not necessarily going to work in the same way here in the sculpting environment. So there is a little bit more kind of patience involved, I suppose. Maybe not the right word for it, but it's a very different beast to the to your standard modeling environment, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. But I guess, so we're halfway in, and I want to make sure that we've got time to look at that controller. So I will do that. Contrary to my earlier point, I will actually grab a few of these at the same time and use that global scale trick. And do the same thing here. So grab those guys, pull those inwards, and then global scale them that way. Now it doesn't look quite like my one over here. You can see this is a little bit more kind of detailed. The points are sharper. Of course, some of them have been pulled out a bit more, but it's exactly the same method. So it's just a matter of spending a bit more time with it. Let's make sure my modifier is back on. There we go. And let's grab that guy. Oh, I've made a bit of an error here. That's okay. I think for the sake of what we're doing here, we're going to be all right. Let's just keep going until we're at the top. And I'm going to pull this guy out and create a bit of a feature out of this one. So let's grab a few more. Did we get some explanation on that other question?
That we did. We got a number of points here. So basically, the star point allows T-splines to be non-rectangular. So when 5 lines come together, so 5 T-spline edges come together, it would be making that star point. And the T-points can be created by many commands, such as insert edge, insert point, so on and so forth, and are used to constrain details. So I guess everybody else is helping out with the answer in addition to clarifying.
Yeah. So I get, oh right, I see what you mean by the start point now. That's a tough one. That's a tough question to address. It's so contextual to the kind of modeling that you're coming up with. Now, this has happened to me a couple of times. There are a few tools in there that can certainly clean that up. I would say here we have on the modify. There is a tool called, which one was it that I used last time to fix my issues? Not merge edge. My goodness, I was looking at it the other day. How did I? Right here. So make uniform is one that could help. Otherwise, sometimes it's a case of just depending on the kind of object you're working on. So some of the times that's been an issue for me. I found that like separating the object out, playing around with the vertices a little bit, and then welding them back together helped to deal with the problem as well. I'm going to just make this guy a little bit more pointed. Oh, you can see there's another case where my pivot is not where I want it to be, so it's not achieving the effect that I want, and I'm going to just grab this guy, and I want my pivot to be here, so that as I rotate it around, it's going to exaggerate this point a little bit more, and let's just correct that out. And this acts as a good example of what I mean regarding the sculpting environment and just the kind of, like, you will understand that as I'm doing that, what I'm trying to create is a pointed effect, and it doesn't quite behave the same way that your model environment would. Now, you can certainly achieve the effect that you want. It's just a case of the patience involved to pull it off. Now, let's just grab a few more. And I'll create a public share link for this chap over here. So if anyone wants to have a play around with this guy and download him, you can all have a go. I'd be really interested to see any kind of like manipulations on that existing one if anyone does feel like doing that. Let's just turn this guy on, pull these ones out, and let's do that. Okay, nearly there. One more. So I guess it's pretty obvious by this point that the edit form tool that we're using here is really quite powerful, and it is going to be the sort of mainstay for a lot of what you're doing. So if I just zoom out here, you can see that in this sort of 20-30 minutes that I've been talking, we've generated something similar, if not exact. Obviously, I spent more time on this guy, and I was working with more faces, but we're kind of there now. Before we wrap him up, we need to give this some thickness. Otherwise, if I hit finish form here, I've got a patch, not a body. Not particularly useful. So we can thicken him here in the model environment, but let's do that in the sketch environment. So I'm just going to double click back here, and I'm going to modify and thicken, and just click on him, and let's give it a thickness of 2.4. And that should work, and I want to give it a soft thicken there. And hit OK. There we go. So kind of got what we want. So I just showed you that quickly, just so you know that because I used a loft and I had a cylinder with no thickness and no top and bottom, Fusion is not going to treat that as a body. It's going to treat it as just a patch, which is what it is. And if you want to 3D print that out, obviously you've got to give it a thickness. Now the reason I've chosen 2.4 millimeters in this case is because I'm working to a denomination of the nozzle thickness, and I know that if I pick 2.4 millimeters, I can also make my shell 2.4 mil thick and ensure that I've got something that's going to work. So I'm going to finish the form, and it's going to have a little think there. Now what I like about the finished form is that if I created any kind of intersecting faces, that final calculation that's happening there while it's thinking, that would have warned me and said that your surface doesn't work as a kind of real-world object. If you try to print that out, it wouldn't work because you created geometry that's just physically impossible. I'll show you how that works. So if I just create a box here, let's just pick over this, and let's pull him right up and give it a bunch of faces. Just real quick. Okay. Now if I grab this one, let's say modify, let's move the screen over so you can see what I'm doing a bit better. And let's just pull him in like that. So that's fine so far. Let's say I grab this guy and I just keep pulling him until so you can see that now that I've let that go, you've got an intersection here, and that doesn't work. If I hit OK and I hit finish form, immediately it's going to tell me that this isn't going to convert and that there's a problem with it. And that's a really good function to have in place. Now, in the case of what I've done here to demonstrate how that works, that's obviously quite an extreme thing. You'd know if you'd done that. But in the case of a pretty complex object with a lot of, well, faces and vertices that are moving around, you might have these tiny little intersections that you'll not notice that you've created. And Fusion's going to pick up on that for you, and it's going to let you know that that's not going to work. So I'm just going to finish the form here and delete this guy because we don't need him. There we go. And just to wrap this guy up here, I'm going to open this up, and I've got my bottom sketch that I created to begin with down there. And you'll see that it doesn't quite fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click this sketch, edit. Where's my edit gone? All right, I did that in the form, so I'm just going to create a new sketch. And let's go with circle. Let's just make a circle that's just slightly bigger than that radius that we had to begin with. So I'm just going to go there, stop that sketch, and turn sketch 1 off. And I'm going to use my press pull, grab that, and just push this up a little bit. So let's say 3 millimeters. And change that from cut to join. Now, I'm rushing here, so this is a little clumsy, but if I hit OK, I now know that if I 3D print this out, I've at least got a nice base there. So that's the very basics. So that's that guy there. Now I'm going to jump over here and show you this one. So this is a game controller that I'm working on, and I'm coming back to this model every now and again, and you can see there's a fair amount of complexity to this geometry. Obviously, these features here, like these thumbsticks and these slide-out cartridges, these are added later on. But if I jump back to my first form, you can see what I've got there. Now, I created that from the box tool, and I'm just going to show you how I did that. So I'm going to start a new design, and I'm going to go to create form, and I'm going to use a box. I'm not going to do this one to any dimensions. I'm just going to show you visually how this guy works. So let's just, we want 4 in that direction, and I think 4 in that direction, and then maybe, yeah, 4 in that direction too. Now you see before, when I was using symmetry, I was jumping over here and using internal, but you can actually just add symmetry straight away here in the dialog box. So I'm just going to add a mirror, and then I want to mirror it along the length, and hit OK. Now I'm just going to cover this very quickly in 10 minutes, and then when the 10 minutes are wrapped up, we've got a final 10 minutes and we can do some more Q&A. But this shape did become this, so, or rather, this guy here. And you can see I've got a few features here that I worked on to create this. And you can see, like here, we've got an edge, and that face doesn't have that. There's a couple of features on the underside as well, like these hard edges. So I'm going to show you those real quick. So this guy here. Now, when I created that controller, it was a case of, this is what I was talking about before, of saying start with a first pass and then add more detail as you go along. So the very first thing that I did was I grabbed these 4 faces. You can see that as I grab and I select on this side, I've got a yellow selection on this side, and that's just the symmetry of what I'm working on. And I'm going to change my pivot to be here in the center, green tick, do that, and I'm just going to push this in. You can see as I'm pushing it in, I'm starting to already get kind of a very, very rough kind of, I would say, an avatar for a game controller. And now if I pull this guy out this way, I'm starting to get a little bit more what I want, and I'm going to rotate it. And then, whoops. I don't know why that keeps happening to me today. Let's rotate it around there. That's good. And just grab these faces here, push those up. And then, not that, I want to grab these faces, these edges rather. And not that face, but those edges. Grab those. So look at it here and start to push that up a little bit. And then where I have my triggers, I can just grab this edge and start to pull that in and go back to my right view and rotate that around. And then just over here, grab this guy pull it in. And you can see that just in these 5 minutes that I've been messing around with it, you're starting to get a very, very rough idea that this, like, if I didn't tell you what I was working on, you could probably figure out that I'm sort of making my way towards designing a game controller. Let me grab this one and pull that in and then scale it. Now, let's rotate this guy as well. Bring it around. That really will start to give you a shape that is going to do what you want it to do. It's going to start to look like your controller. And I'm going to rotate this guy a little bit too. But there are some extra features and some pretty cool things that you can do with the sculpt environment. Whoops, I forgot to green tick there. Let's pull that in. Now, can you guys see that there? So if I try to finish this form, I'm going to have an error again, or I'm going to have a very sharp edge that's not really pleasant. So I'm going to just do that and pull him in. Now, you'll notice that as I've been playing around with the sculpting environment, this is all well and good if you want to create blob shapes. So if we were doing the Xbox 360 controller, that'd be great. That thing's a very smooth object. There's no sharp edges on it at all. But if you were doing the Xbox One controller, there are sharp edges on that guy. And we can do that in the sculpt environment. Or rather, we can start to get a pretty good idea of where we could start to create some hard edges or hard faces. So under Modify, there's a whole series of tools here. And two of my favorites are Crease and Bridge. Where the bridge is gone. There's Bridge. So first I'm going to show you Crease. Now, Crease basically takes one of these, an edge on your object, and as you can see, as I'm going around, it's starting to harden that corner, and I can continue that here. And if I hit OK, so you can see where I had a very rounded corner before, and I'll do that in the top view so you've got a better idea of it. I've now got a sharp corner. If I undo it, you can see just how much of a difference that makes. So when you need to mix the two together, that's something you can do there. Now the bridge tool is it's a pretty different kind of function. So you can bridge internally, and I'll show you what that does. So if I create a bridge here, and then I select the corresponding underside here, and I hit OK. Now, why didn't that work? Let's try it another way. Let's go here and here. So you can see what that's done is it's essentially created a bridge. In the case of a solid object, it's created an inverted bridge between those two faces, and it averages it out for you, and it does a lot of the hard work too. This has been really popular. This was really popular with me when I started using Fusion because basically meant that I could do what was very popular with architects at the time really, really quite easily. But you can use the bridge tool in another way too. So if I create another box over here, and I pull that out like that and hit OK, I can connect between these two objects. So I can go back to bridge, and I can pick that face, and I can pick that face. If I hit OK here, one of the T-spline bodies connected does not contain symmetry. Right, whoopsie doodle. Let's just move that over, and pull that over here, move that up again. Let's just connect between these two faces. Bridge. Let's bridge that guy. And let's bridge that guy. Right. I don't know what's going on there, so I'm just going to create a new file to show you how that works. Yep. Okay. Okay. You don't want to rotate for me? There we go. And let's bridge. Okay. There you go. So you can use that to connect objects together as well. That's gone a bit crazy there, but I assure you that usually it works pretty well. I think the reason that's happened there is I didn't align my arrows, so I just bridge one more time. And right, so side one. There we go. Now let's okay that. There we go. You can see I don't have a rotation split here. And I guess that kind of covers everything that I want to show you guys with the sculpt environment. I want to say that the stuff I've shown you today is like we've really just scratched the surface. There is a whole list of tools here that all do fantastic functions. Pull is another really great one that I love to use. I get sent a lot of 3D scan data, and sometimes I just get an STL and I'm expected to, and the person I'm trying to help out just expects me to be able to do something with that. Now, if you bring that into Fusion, there's not a huge amount you can do with just a 3D scan file if you've uploaded an STL into the work environment. But what you can do, say, for example, with a 3D scanned object, is you can create a cylinder around that, and you can pull all the vertice edges onto the surface, and then it starts to create an approximation of what was there to begin with. And I can show you that with this guy over here. So I have a plaster cast of an object, and I opened the wrong one. Wasn't that clever? Where is it gone? Nope, wrong folder. Oh no, it's that guy there. So you can see here, that's the scan that I had, and that is the sculpt environment created from that same scan. So that's the scan. If I turn that around, now in bodies, you can see that this is a mesh, and usually you can convert this, but if I try to convert this object, it's not going to do it because I don't have any quads. I've only got triangles. That's a bit of an issue. What I can do though is what I did in this case is I surrounded it with a cylinder and created something with a huge number of faces, as you can see here. And then using the pull tool automatically basically magnetizes itself to that scan and gives you an approximation of what the scan data was. And this is editable and this is usable in Fusion because it's a T-spline surface. So that's another one of the really, really great functions in the T-spline environment. So I guess I'm just going to open it up to questions now. I think I've...
Are you able to
you got any more questions, James?
Are you able to see them, or would you like me to read some of them to you?
I can't see any of these questions.
Okay, so how about this?
I can't see the questions.
So how you pulled in multiple points at the same time all the way around the base. So can you do it the whole way around? So I'm guessing like double clicking a line and getting the whole line selected around the base is what he's going for there.
So if I double click like that, I can select the whole edge. But if I modify this now, so if I grab this, can you see how that's affecting it? It sort of treats it like a platter.
There you go.
So it's not quite going to do what we wanted to do here. But if I did go around and pick all the points, once I create a loop, you'll see that I'm just going to minimize that guy. If I go all the way around, now I'm not sure if this is going to work because I've made so many changes to the object, but can you see as I'm doing that, my gumball is it's changing its position, it's averaging itself against, oh, I lost my selection there. it's averaging itself against where those points are, which is why it keeps moving around. Now, once you've created a loop, what you'll see is that should then put itself somewhere in the center. Now, in this case, it's because I'm missing a few. Let's grab that one and that one. There we go. And that's sort of in the middle of those guys. Obviously, because these, if you try to draw a line around this, you'd see that obviously it's not uniform anymore. But that's one way of affecting those objects like that. So you can see how that, and I've got that face selected. I don't want to, there we go. Now the face is deselected. Now I'm in the middle, and I can start to affect them like that.
Perfect.
So that's one way of doing it.
Could you also jump into the patch environment and show us how to seal off the bottom of the vase?
Sure. I'm just gonna undo a few things to get back to this when it was in its patch mode. Wait, what am I doing? I'm in the sculpt environment. Sorry, let me just, there we go. Undo that. And keep going until we're at patch. There we go. So we're at patch. Now I can go sculpt, patch, and on the bottom here, if I go to create and patch, I can pick that bottom edge and hit OK. Now that works, but again, it's still just a patch, so you still have to thicken this whole thing afterwards. But before you do that, you can see I've got two patches here. And the first tool on the modify is stitch, or the icon just there. So just want to stitch these things together. Okay. Now why didn't that work? There we go. All right, my mistake. So you can see when I stitched it there, I had a green edge. So no, come on, and this guy. So we've got a green edge there, and the green edge lets me know that when I hit OK, those are going to be turned into one thing. So that's one way of doing it. Now that I've got that there, I can then thicken this. How do I do that? I'm going to go back to my model environment and thicken is somewhere. Where is thicken gone? There it is. There's the guy. Grab him, and then I want to do that outwards. So let's just pull it that way. This is a pretty complex geometry, so it's going to have a bit of a think on that one.
Mm-hmm. While it's thinking,
But that's
sure.
That's how you do that.
While it's thinking, I have another one for you, and I'm interested in your answer. So it says, may I ask if Fusion is able to create assemblies of the same quality as Inventor?
Man, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
That's what
it's
I would
like asking me, is Pablo Picasso better than Rembrandt? So far as far as the kind of stuff that I've been building in Fusion, I haven't felt the need to use Inventor at all. I'm currently, and as much as I would love to show it to you, I can't right now, but I'm currently designing a motorbike, and I'm doing that in Fusion. And so obviously any kind of motor vehicle has got a huge number of parts, and I've not felt the need to go to Inventor. So you can do pretty complex assemblies in Fusion, but it's so contextual. I have no idea what you're making, but I'm gonna just take the kind of default assumption that yeah.
All right. I have one more here, and then we probably need to wrap it up. Two more here, and then we need to wrap it up. One,
Sure.
Can you create generative designs, or is that coming in the future to your knowledge?
you can create generative designs. We have the API, and the API will take Python script and JavaScript and C++. And Mike Aubrey's done a pretty good video recently on how you can use that API to generate things, and he shows how you can do a Fibonacci spiral. So you can see that on the YouTube channel.
Awesome. And let's see, can we see section analysis of patch and vase as whole? So I guess,
Sure.
Can we do a section analysis on this?
Yeah, here you go. There we are.
There we go. Beautiful. Let's see here. And one more. I know I lied. I said two more, but there's one last one. So what would be the best approach to show a scroll on wood, such as wood carving? The scroll needs to be proud on the face. And I don't know what that means, but maybe you do.
Scroll on wood. I'm assuming you mean some kind of embossing. So if you're doing an embossing, now there are a couple of ways of doing that. You could project the geometries onto the scroll shape, and then you can extrude those out. You could actually just use a flat extrusion and then extrude with a taper that's tangential to your scroll. That's two ways I can think of doing it off the top of my head. I know that someone's created a tool in the API that will map text to complex geometries. I don't know if it'll map anything else, but they created that so they could get a uniform extrusion onto like a curved shape, so that you can find that in the API store.
Perfect. All right. So I think we best call it a day then. And Paul, if you don't have anything else, thank you very much for your time. And for everyone else, I will be making sure to get this loaded up to YouTube as quickly as possible, and then you can review it for any questions that you might have. So please feel free to look at that one, and if you do have any further questions, you can reach out to either Paul or I. You can see his name on the screen right there, and you'll probably be getting a follow-up email from me that you can reply to, but it's james.herzing@autodesk.com. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll be seeing you soon.
All right, thanks guys. Have a great evening.